What is going on, everyone? It is Connor, the co-host with the most, now host with the most, here with another episode of Clutch Crew Sports. And on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the NFL trade deadline, which is going to be coming up, some of the trades that have already been made, and some of the potential trades that could be happening here in the coming weeks with the NFL trade deadline fast approaching. Also, disclaimer, if I don't sound right, I'm a bit under the weather, so my voice is probably going to sound a little weird, and I'm probably going to sniffle a little bit, but I'm here, I'm powering through, and let's get right into it here. So we are going to go around the shield now. The NFL trade deadline is on November 1st this year, so we have one more week of NFL action before the trade deadline happens. So, of course, one more week left for everyone to evaluate players, but of course, deals are already happening around the league. And so we're going to take a look at a couple of the deals that happened already here in the last couple of days. So, of course, the first one that kind of set everything off was the Robbie Anderson trade from the Carolina Panthers to the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Robbie Anderson had been very fed up with the Carolina Panthers. He, had asked for a trade. He had gotten sent back to the locker room in the middle of a game. Steve Wilks had sent him back to the locker room. So definitely a no-brainer there that the Panthers were going to trade him. They did trade him to the Arizona Cardinals, which was a little bit of an interesting move. The Cardinals, they do now have DeAndre Hopkins back, so Robbie Anderson's definitely a clear wide receiver 3 on that team, with Hopkins being number 1 and Marquise Hollywood Brown being number 2. But I'm sure he'll hopefully like the atmosphere there better. I know the big problem for him in Carolina was the fact that he's really a deep threat wide receiver. He's like a home run threat receiver. He's like a taller version of Tyreek Hill, I guess you could say, in terms of he's just like a deep threat. Because he's not really one of these like kind of underneath route running, Stephon Diggs type of wide receivers. Like he's a guy just go deep and throw it up and I'll get it. And that wasn't happening in Carolina. That's not their style of offense. Baker Mayfield, not the greatest deep ball thrower in the world. Sam Darnold also not as well. So he's going to definitely get another chance here with Kyler Murray to see how it goes. He can definitely come in on some of those deep passing plays and hopefully get a couple of home run threats for him. But that wasn't the only move the Carolina Panthers made. Now, if you guys do remember, a couple of weeks ago on Eric and Zach's final episode on the podcast, they did a Carolina Panthers rebuild. So go back and check that one out if you haven't already. But this was actually part of their rebuild. Part of it was trading Robbie Anderson away. And the second part of it, or at least part of the rebuild as well, was the other trade here that if you guys are watching on YouTube, you can see Christian McCaffrey getting traded to the San Francisco 49ers. I believe it was a second, a third, and some other future late round draft picks were thrown in there for the Niners to acquire Christian McCaffrey. So the Panthers are definitely going full rebuild mode here. Like I said, they trade Anderson, they trade McCaffrey. There's potential that they could be trading a couple other pieces here coming up soon. I'm not going to really cover the Panthers potential moves in this episode just because they've already made a couple, but there could be more coming from the Panthers. Like I said, this is a team that's in full rebuild mode, possibly going to be trying to get the number 1 overall draft pick, which unfortunately for them, they're kind of failing at right now because they beat the Buccaneers. So, unfortunately, they're not in line for the number 1 pick as teams like the Lions and Texans still have worse records than them, but they are in full rebuild mode. McCaffrey going to the 49ers. I like the move on both ends. I think it's a really good move for Carolina. Just, start this rebuild, blow it all up and start over again. McCaffrey, while he's been a great player when he's been healthy, he's been injured a lot. He's been, it's like when you're not out on the field, you can't justify paying him all this money that they've been paying him. So, like I said, but he's a really dynamic player when he's healthy, which is what makes it really good for the 49ers. And I don't think he's going to be all the injuries and stuff. It's not going to be as, I don't know if I want to say as easy, but I feel like he has a better chance of not getting injured in San Francisco because in Carolina, DJ Moore was of course an option, but for the most part, Christian McCaffrey was the offense in Carolina. Like I said, DJ Moore is also really talented, but that offense ran through Christian McCaffrey, whereas the Niners have so many other weapons that they can implement. They've got Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, even the other running backs, Jeff Wilson, has been really good in the absence of Eli Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell was really good last year, so McCaffrey's not going to have to be relied upon as heavily in this offense as he was in Carolina, which is going to help him in terms of like staying healthy and not getting hurt. So, like I said, I like the move for San Francisco. Just adds another piece to that offense. I mean, in my mind, San Francisco is definitely a legit contender to come out of the NFC to make it to the Super Bowl. I don't know if I would potentially call them the Super Bowl favorite right now. The NFC is so jumbled right now. I mean, of course, the Eagles are still undefeated. The Giants are 5-1, but the Niners definitely have a legit shot, and Christian McCaffrey really helps. Definitely an interesting destination for him. I know there had been a lot of rumors linking him to the Buffalo Bills for a long time, which that would have been really deadly had he gone to the Buffalo Bills. Like, if McCaffrey had gone to the Bills, then I would have just said, GG everyone else, like Bills taking the Super Bowl easily. But he goes to San Francisco, so like I said, good move on both sides in my opinion. The other big news that came out just yesterday, and well, technically 2 days ago because I'm recording this on Tuesday, but you're going to see it on Wednesday. So for when you guys are seeing this, technically 2 days ago, the Jacksonville Jaguars trading James Robinson to the New York Jets for a conditional 6th round pick. And that's it, a conditional 6th rounder. Now, definitely a surprising move, in my opinion, on the part of the Jaguars. I guess I don't know if the Jaguars are thinking that, I'm not sure what their thought is here. Are they thinking that they're going to want to make Travis Etienne the for sure number one back, and that's why they're trading James Robinson? Like, they don't want to have any sort of running back controversy there, because Robinson, he's been a workhorse for this team. He hasn't performed as well in the past few games, but of course, like, as they're getting Etienne involved in the offense, Robinson was getting used less and less, but he's been one of the bright spots on this offense for the past couple of years. So, like I said, I don't know if they're just trying to make Etienne the number one back, or, if something else was going on with him. It just seems really weird for them to trade him for just a 6th round pick. And also, given that, I know the Jaguars are only 2-5 right now, but like, they have shown flashes of being really good this year. And it seems, unless they're just trying to write this season off again, which I don't think is happening. I don't see why they would write the season off when, the AFC South, in my mind, is still pretty wide open. Like, I know the Titans have a decent lead, but, the Jaguars, they still have a good chance to win the division if they can, get back on track and win some of these games, because, they have the victory over the Colts. So, they have that going for them. They haven't played the Titans yet, so they still have 2 games against Tennessee. If they win both of those, if they can beat Houston the next time around, who knows? But I don't know exactly what Zach's thoughts on this were, but I know Eric was unhappy with this trade, given that they're both Jags fans. I know Eric wasn't happy. And like I said, it's just a little bit of a head scratcher. It makes a lot of sense for the New York Jets, given that Breece Hall just went down with an ACL injury. So that way, now Michael Carter doesn't have to handle the whole load himself. James Robinson's also there to help out as well. So it makes a lot of sense for the New York Jets. I mean, really good on the New York Jets for that one. I'd give them an A+ for that one. The Jags, I'd probably give a C to. Like I said, unless they're just trying to write this season off again, I don't really see as much of the logic going on there. I mean, he didn't play at all last week. I'm assuming they just wanted to bench him and not have him get hurt, so that way they could trade him. So, I said, I'm guessing Eric and Zach probably could give a better analysis on potentially what the Jets or what the Jaguars were thinking there, but I don't know, just interesting. So those are the trades that already have happened. So I'm going to look at 4 players that could potentially get traded before the trade deadline. Now, we hear this a lot with a lot of these sports, like, oh, come up to the trade deadline. I'm hoping for everyone's sake that, like, teams are active at the trade deadline, because it seems like, the past couple of seasons, not just in the NFL, but like the NHL, the NBA, I know the NHL trade deadline was very active last year, but I mean, just all the sports in general, seems like they always hype up all these things that could happen before the trade deadline, and then none of them happen. And like, they'll maybe be like one move that'll happen, and then that's it. So I'm hoping for us as viewers' sake and entertainment's sake that more stuff does happen. Of course, there are players that are disgruntled with their current situation. One example, of course, is I picked out 4 players that were like 4 bigger name players. So, of course, every team is like looking to, ship someone or trade someone. And But a lot of those people you don't even like really know of who they are. They're backups or they're whatever. So these are four guys that are starters that could potentially be starters on other teams as well. Could make an immediate impact. Who knows? But we'll start with Kareem Hunt. Now, there's obviously been the documented that he requested a trade out of Cleveland. There's been he's had that whole tandem going in Cleveland with Nick Chubb, but Nick Chubb really has established himself as the true RB1. Like, he was RB1 anyway, but he really has started to break away, and Kareem Hunt's been getting less and less touches every game. I mean, Chubb's just been an absolute beast this year. It seems like every week he's a lock for 100 yards rushing and a touchdown. He's the NFL's leading rusher at the moment. So Kareem Hunt asked for a trade before the season started. The Browns GM basically said, we're not dealing him. But of course, now that the trade deadline's coming up, these rumors are circulating again. And there's a lot of teams that are going to potentially be interested in Kareem Hunt, especially because I think the James Robinson trade with the Jets really set the standard here that you're not really going to have to give up all that much for, to get a decent running back, from what it seems like. Because running backs, I mean, the value of running backs, we've talked about this before on the podcast, the value of running backs has basically just plummeted. They're not valued as much anymore. It's a pass-heavy league, especially when a lot of these running backs, their best years are like their first 4 or 5 seasons, and then, that's basically their prime. Like, from the time that they're a rookie to the end of their rookie contract are like their best seasons. And then, like, they may have another few good seasons, like year 6 and 7, but then they just kind of start to tail off. And Hunt's a veteran. He's an older running back. So if there's potential that someone could go out and get him and potentially get a good price on him, he's still a decent running back. We don't get to see as much of him as enough, but when he does get the ball, he can make things happen. He's a big, strong runner. He's very similar in that respect to Nick Chubb. He's a power runner. But he's also a good pass catcher. We saw that in his time in Kansas City. He was a good pass catcher. That's kind of his role in the Cleveland offense right now. Is Nick Chubb's not the greatest receiving back in the world. So Kareem Hunt kind of gives them like that third down running back, that third down back that can catch passes, run routes, and get first downs. So there's a lot of potential teams that could be in the running for him. I know the Jets were, of course, brought up, but now that's not going to happen anymore because they already made the trade for James Robinson. There's the Buffalo Bills that could potentially, they were linked to Christian McCaffrey. There's potentially some other teams that could be interested in him. But basically for each of these guys, I'm going to make a prediction on where I think they're going to go if they get traded, because there's no guarantee that any of them do get traded. But for me, with Kareem Hunt, I'm going to go ahead and predict that he gets traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Eagles did a very run-heavy offense. Jalen Hurts is a mobile quarterback, a running quarterback. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. They're 6-0 right now, and their whole offense is just built on the run game. And the problem with Philadelphia is that their running backs have just been really inconsistent. Whereas, Miles Sanders, he's the RB1, he's the veteran, but he's just been inconsistent at times. And I know Philadelphia, they want to bring in a veteran running back to be part of that committee because they do really like Kenneth Gainwell, and he's shown some really good moments as well. But he's still just I don't think the Eagles or a lot of people around the league really think that he's ready to step into that RB1 role and be like a true workhorse running back. And Kareem Hunt could be another nice cog in that room for the Philadelphia Eagles, especially if, Miles Sanders is at the end of his contract. If Kareem Hunt does enough well this year, they can sign him to a new contract and let Miles Sanders go at the end of the season. But, for the Philadelphia Eagles, it could never hurt to have another running back. So especially since, like I said earlier, with the James Robinson trade, where the Jets only had to give up a conditional 6th rounder to get him, the Eagles could easily get Kareem Hunt for something probably pretty similar to that. The Browns maybe might want a little bit more for him, say like a 5th or a 4th rounder. But I mean, if I'm the Eagles, have my draft picks. We're going for a Super Bowl. We're 6-0 right now. We're in win now mode. You can take my draft picks. I would have no qualms at all if I was the Eagles about giving up, like a 4th round pick for Kareem Hunt. It may be a little bit too much, but when you're trying to win a Super Bowl and if you really like how he fits with your team and you think he's going to fit that mold, then by all means go after and get him. So Kareem Hunt, I have going to the Philadelphia Eagles. Moving on to a wide receiver on this group, I tried to keep the positions a bit diversified. Unfortunately, there was a lot of running backs that were on the potential watch list, so I tried to find a few different positions. So moving on to wide receiver, and that being Brandin Cooks of the Houston Texans, one of the most underrated wide receivers in the entire league. The dude, he consistently puts up 1,000 yards receiving despite, playing for Houston. He's like kind of like what DeAndre Hopkins used to do. Hopkins used to be putting up all these good numbers in Houston despite having mediocre quarterback play. Cooks has been doing that as well. I mean, he's not the dynamic playmaker that Hopkins is or was, but, he's quietly and consistently been putting up really good seasons and really good numbers in Houston. And he's, the true wide receiver one. So, but the Houston Texans are, of course, in rebuild mode. Seems like they've been in rebuild mode ever since, the whole Deshaun Watson debacle. So, they're in rebuild mode. Cooks is a veteran receiver that, they might not necessarily want to give a new contract to. So maybe let's trade him while he still has value and can get good value out of him. He could be a good piece for a lot of teams that are looking for receiving help. I know the LA Rams have had a big problem with receivers. Of course they have Cooper Kupp, but no one outside of Cooper Kupp has done anything good for them in the receiving game. The Baltimore Ravens, outside of Rashad Bateman, who's been injured a lot, they've got Devin Duvernay, but he's not really a true wide receiver one. So the Ravens could certainly use some receiving help. There's just, you can never have too many wide receivers in today's NFL. We talked about how running backs really have had this real diminished value and how they're not valued as much. Wide receivers are primo these days. In the pass heavy league, you can, again, like I said, you can never have too many wide receivers. So that being said, when it comes to Brandin Cooks, my prediction for where he's going to go is I have him going to the Green Bay Packers. That's, the Green Bay Packers, it's hard to believe that they would trade for him because it seems like the Packers are allergic to giving Aaron Rodgers any sort of weapons on offense. They had multiple chances to draft, a wide receiver in the first round last year, and they didn't after trading away Davante Adams, and then there was the year that they drafted Jordan Love instead of drafting a receiver. Like, the Packers are allergic to giving Aaron Rodgers weapons, but this would be a really good move for them because the Packers are struggling, and Brandin Cooks can come in and be that wide receiver one. Because I've also talked about this before, that the Packers don't have a wide receiver one. Their de facto wide receiver one right now is Allen Lazard, who, in my opinion, he's a wide receiver two at best. He's not a wide receiver one. Christian Watson's a rookie. Randall Cobb is past his prime. Rasul Dobbs is, he's been up and down and around. He's, been inconsistent. So Brandin Cooks, if they can make a trade for Brandin Cooks, he would step in and be that wide receiver one that Rodgers needs. Now, is he on the level of Davante Adams? Absolutely not. He's not a top 10 wide receiver, but he can be that consistent, reliable target that Aaron Rodgers needs because Rodgers has been struggling, the Packers are struggling, and this offense needs an overhaul, and Brandin Cooks would be a good piece to bring in to overhaul this offense and do good for it. Moving on over to the defensive side of the ball here, we have a player from the Chicago Bears, that being Robert Quinn. Now, Robert Quinn, he's had he's another veteran on this list, and kind of definitely had a career resurgence last year, put up 18.5 sacks on this Bears team last year, so definitely really good numbers that he put up in the regular season last year. He came to Chicago and he was playing alongside Khalil Mack, and a lot of people didn't really think much of him, like that he was going to put up a lot of numbers. But like I said, 18.5 sacks last year. He's towards the twilight of his career, and the problem for him now is he's only got one sack through 6 games now this year, 6 or 7. I can't remember if the Bears, they've had their bye week, I think. So 6 games. He's got one sack through 6 games. And the Bears definitely don't want to, continue to pay him and continue to hold on to him because the Bears are another team that are in rebuild mode right now. So, it's definitely would be an advantageous situation for them to go ahead and try and get some trade value for Robert Quinn. I know, especially with the Bears, they were hoping that they could have traded him last year when they could have gotten more value for him. That didn't happen. I think they thought that maybe he would be able to step in this year and have the same kind of success, but that just hasn't happened as well. So looking at teams that could be potential trade partners for him, there's a same as wide receivers. Like edge rushers are primo capital in the NFL these days. Like they put a lot of value on edge rushers. Being able to get pressure on the quarterback is huge, and he could definitely be a good piece somewhere where he can play alongside someone else. Like he's not going to get traded somewhere to be like the number one edge rusher because he's just not that anymore. He's past his prime. He's not at the age where he can do that anymore. So he's got to get traded somewhere where he can be, the number two option, play alongside someone, and be able to put up numbers as well. I mean, there's a lot of teams that he could potentially go to, but my prediction for Robert Quinn and the Chicago Bears is the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, the Chargers, of course, they have Khalil Mack, so this would be really interesting, him going back and being with Khalil Mack again after, being with him in Chicago for a few seasons. But, Robert Quinn, the Chargers, like I said, they have Khalil Mack, but Joey Bosa is injured yet again, and apparently his groin injury is more severe than they thought it was originally. They thought maybe he'd be able to make a return here coming up in the upcoming weeks, but it looks like he's going to miss more time. The injury is more severe, and bringing in Robert Quinn would be huge because, their pass rush has really stalled without Joey Bosa. Teams, they can just put those double teams on Khalil Mack and be done with it. But now, if they could bring in Robert Quinn, then they would be able to, bring in someone that could play alongside Khalil Mack, that could play alongside him, and potentially get sacks and get different, get pressure on the quarterback because this Chargers defense has been really lacking since they lost Joey Bosa. They also just lost J.C. Jackson to a season-ending injury, so they need to bring in another defensive piece to really help out and do better on that side of the ball, and I think Robert Quinn is the one to do it, and the Bears, they want to trade him. This isn't, out of all the people on this list, I think the most likely to get traded is Robert Quinn, so the opportunity is definitely there. So then moving on to the last guy on the list, another running back, I have Cam Akers from the Los Angeles Rams. Now, Cam Akers was supposed to come into this year and be the RB1 for the Los Angeles Rams, and it seems like Sean McVay and the Rams have given up on him. They don't want anything more to do with him. Darrell Henderson's been the lead running back for most of the season, and it seems like the Cam Akers experiment is over. Now, another very similar situation to Kareem Hunt, where I think a lot of teams could trade for him and get, not have to give up a lot, but he would have to go somewhere and be part of a committee like Kareem Hunt. He would have to be part of a committee. He's not going to be the RB1. He's not going to be a workhorse. He would have to go somewhere where he could fit in and, just be part of a system. And I'm going to keep it short on him because a lot of the things that I said about Kareem Hunt, I'm going to say about him as well, so I'm not going to dwell on that. But my prediction for Cam Akers is that he gets traded to the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Buffalo Bills, like I mentioned earlier, they were in the sweepstakes for Christian McCaffrey. Didn't end up working out there. There were some rumors at one point that they were trying to trade for Saquon Barkley, but I don't see any reason why the Giants would trade Saquon now, especially given the fact that they're 5-1. But the other reason why it makes sense in my mind for the Bills to trade for him is because they may not have to give up any draft capital to get him, because there's been a lot of rumors that the Bills are looking to trade Zach Moss. Because they've got Devin Singletary, who's their leading running back. They've also got the rookie James Cook, who I know they want to get more involved in the offense. They could potentially do a player swap, like give Zach Moss to the Rams and get Cam Akers in return. And again, Cam Akers, when he goes there, he wouldn't have to step in and be the RB1. Singletary is the RB1. And, the Bills also aren't a run-heavy team. They're a pass-heavy team. And Akers, he's a decent pass catcher. He could fit in as a third-down running back. He wouldn't have to carry the ball as often. And, you get to play with Josh Allen. So, I think Cam Akers could be a good fit for the Buffalo Bills. Will they trade for him? I don't know. They could just end up trading Zach Moss and then going with the two-man committee with Cook and Singletary. Maybe that's the reason why they want to trade Zach Moss, is they don't want that 3 running back committee. But like I said, I could potentially see a player swap happening with the Bills where they give Zach Moss to the Rams and then get Cam Akers in return. So thank you guys so much for watching. These are my predictions on a couple of the players that could potentially get traded at the upcoming trade deadline. Let me know down in the comments who you think could get traded, where you think these players could potentially go if they get traded, and also what grades you would give the other trades, the Christian McCaffrey trade, the Robbie Anderson trade, and the James Robinson trade. What kind of grades you would give on those? Who do you think won those trades? Make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Counting down to February. You don't want to miss these last episodes of Clutch Crew Sports. They're going to be good. And until then, we'll be back with the lock board again on Friday. I should have Eric with me on that one. I don't think Zach's going to be a part of it because he's traveling right now, but I should have Eric on for that episode. So make sure you stay tuned for that on Friday. And until then, we'll see you guys next time.